So I would say improv is my longest art form. I've been obsessed with it since I was like 12 and then got into it in college and then created a troupe in 2009. And then that troupe went on to do really big things. And so much of the art of improv is being a version of yourself. At the same time, I'm one of those millennials who learned during the pandemic that I'm autistic as fuck. And so most of what you're seeing is authentic, but it's also me masking. But then it's also not, because I've found so much art through being vulnerable. And so that's why I come across as so authentic, is because I'm just live streaming my brain.
Hello, loves. Welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Esfandiari, and today I'm kind of double teaming you with another Jessica. I
Hi.
have, yes, I'm super stoked. You're my first, I think, other Jessica. Jessica Levity, Daylover, is an entertainer. She's a storyteller. She's also the host of Remodeled Love podcast, along with being an author. Just published a book. So among a million other things, I'm sure. Yay, Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm honestly been fangirling for a while. So when I reached out and you wrote right back, I was like, amazing. Okay, cool. When can we do this? So yeah, I think I know a lot about who you are just because you share your life so openly and pretty authentically on Instagram and online spaces. But for people who are just getting a first peek at you, can you give us a little insight to how you ended up being all that you are in this polyamorous mama world?
That's a really great question. Well, it all started November 30th, 1985 in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a Midwest girl born and raised. I got my bachelor's degree in philosophy and sociology from LGBT studies, my minor, from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. 2008 graduated, and then just randomly moved to Reno. Had a cousin here, had my brother here, and came here and realized like Reno is this little gem that nobody knows about. You know about it because you go to Burning Man.
Yeah.
And Reno is the portal to Burning Man, but it's just this beautiful, like geographically beautiful and culturally strange place. And out here, I formed an entertainment production company. I have a lot of hit shows. The pandemic killed all of them. And
Damn it.
yeah, and it's kind of a weird blessing because
Hmm.
through that, Remodeled Love was always a back burner project. So Home Slice Productions is the production company under which I produce all kinds of things. I'm ADHD, I'm autistic, and highly creative. And so I do a lot of things. And then so I have a hit comedy troupe, and I come from radio. I have a live radio background, and I do voiceover work and digital media. And so when the pandemic killed all the live stuff, I launched Remodeled Love just because it was something I could do in my home. And I thought that the way that we're living and loving, and we have the privilege of being out, which is part of white privilege and heterosexual privilege, and the fact that neither of us have jobs that are particularly at risk of being out. So I thought people could really benefit from seeing our lives, just living. And so we launched the Remodeled Love podcast and our TikTok. And those are the first two things that went like mega viral. And
Got
now
it.
this is my full-time job. So I don't really do much of the other stuff anymore.
Yeah. Blessing in disguise, that COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate a lot of what you just shared because one of the reasons that I'm always sort of drawn to your content is it is extremely inclusive and you speak all the time about privilege and all the time about sort of the, things that come with it. And I think I have a very similar lived experience to you. I'm a white woman, I'm in a heterosexual presenting marriage situation. And I've had like the freedom and the safety to come out. And I know like a lot of people that listen to my show don't, for whatever reasons they are. And I find that I have a lot of listeners who have kids. And so I can't speak to that experience because I don't have children yet. We're planning to. But what I love about what you've done is not only do you have children and you live this very publicly online, but you wrote this book recently. And I'm guessing I haven't read it yet, but I'm guessing that it is a guide for parents who, have the ability to live this lifestyle, whether they're out or not. I'm not so sure what the book entails, but how to balance these two. And your kids are young.
Yeah.
Your kids are pretty. How old are your kids?
1.5 and 4.5.
And you've been poly for, well, how long have you been poly?
Like 10 years.
Yeah. So you guys had like solidified this foundation in your
Yes,
life.
and we talk about that in the book, that we would not recommend exploring polyamory while pregnant or like early stage of parenthood, nor would we recommend having kids if you are in the turbulent stages, like early stages of poly. Like those two things, in my opinion, need to happen completely separately, and we can get into that.
I was going to ask, did you guys shut it down when you had kids or when you were pregnant? Like, were
Oh
you
no,
like, okay,
not at all, not even.
not at all.
Mm-mm. No,
So
because
you
we were
still
super good,
great.
because we had been polyamorous for like 5-6 years at that point, and we were totally fine. We were completely integrated.
You were in a great
Oh yeah.
place to
Oh yeah.
still continue.
Mhm.
Okay. That's how I feel. I mean, I'm in a unique situation. We are planning to have a family next year. I can't physically get pregnant, so which we've known for a long time, so we've been planning to have a surrogate. And then if that wasn't going to work, we were going to adopt, but we're going to go the surrogate route. And I imagine we'll live life the same also because like I'm blessed in a certain way. I guess you can look at it that I don't have to, I'm like not going to be pregnant so I can carry on.
Mhm.
And we are in a really solid place. I get that question all the time. Are you going to stop when you have kids? And it's like, no, why?
I just wanted to talk about, yes, on our page, we talk about privilege always, because we have to understand the identity and the privileges of the person spouting quote unquote wisdom at us, because that wisdom is not going to be the same for everybody. And the more privilege you have, the less your wisdom is going to apply to someone with less privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have two white women in
Mm-hmm.
heterosexual legal marriages, both named Jessica, for Christ's sake, talking
Yeah.
about how we do polyamory and how we do parenthood. And that is not going to be the same for a non-white, trans, disabled, poor person.
Yeah.
And so, I grapple a lot with, I have a lot of colleagues, and I'm privileged and so blessed to work with some of the greatest polyamorous content creators across the globe. And I'm privy to see behind the scenes because there's a group chat. And a lot of the black creators talk a lot about how much harder they have to work to get their content seen, to be taken as seriously, to get the same interviews.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I try as hard as I can to uplift, minority, or the new term global majority voices, to be heard, and also recognize that at the same time that my wisdom is still playing a role. And so the way that I sort of try to integrate that shadow, so to speak, is
Mm.
just reminding folks constantly that, sure, listen to this interview, read my book, but then go read another book from a person very different from me, so that you are understanding that the way that my wisdom is inherently tied to my privilege. And your polyamorous content should be extremely diverse. And if it's not, try harder.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for always pointing it out and always making the space to like set the tone for not only your page, but like all the work that you do, other shows that I've heard you on and on your podcast, because it just takes a moment to take that extra step to set the context. Um, and it goes so far to not only further educate people that there are many more lived experiences than their own, so that people can, I think, for many of us will hear that call and it'll expand our perspective, but also make us more compassionate and have us just be more inclusive in our day-to-day, even if we're not content creators. And that spills into like every other area. um and I just I personally like feel, at with the privilege that we have this responsibility also because
Mhm.
we are just in that place where our voices do get heard more, or we have more doors open for us because of how we look or what families we were born into. And it's true, like, especially for the Black community, they've had to work way harder
Mhm.
to have podcasts or have things published. I recently did a show with, do you know Kenya Stevens from Progressive
Mm-mm.
Love Academy?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
She's the first time I heard her speak, I was like, oh my God, this one, like her presence, and she's very theatrical. And so I was like, I'm always drawn to that. But we had a really great conversation around how, like, there's so many content creators who have been doing this for 20, 30 years before it was like less taboo and more accepted. And now it's, hip and niche. But like the Black community's been fighting to
Mhm.
like even be accepted or respected in this space for a long time. And not to say like that there haven't been people from all walks of life who have been also at the front lines of like normalizing non-monogamy. But I think just to also constantly give that room and give that space when we can because we have the ability to. It's important. So
Yeah,
I
and I've heard
appreciate that.
before white people should not be leading the conversation on non-monogamy, and it's so true because our lens is too privileged to and the way that we do polyamory is still very mononormative. And I know that
Mhm.
that can be really difficult to chew on. And we actually talk about that in our book. And I learned that from another Black polyamorous content creator. And ever since I realized that the way that white people do non monogamy is still super mononormative, it really made sense. But at the same time, we can sort of act like a little bit of a bridge. And as long as that bridge is leading to more diverse content and uplifting, minority and marginalized folks' voices, I think that that's really important. So, yeah, glad we had that conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also just want to like last little thing for people listening, right? It doesn't mean that like Jess and I shouldn't speak on it because there are many women who need to see themselves.
Hmm.
And for white women, we've been able to see ourselves for all of the ages. And all we're saying is like, we love making room and creating like those safe spaces so that people who haven't been represented but who have been living it
Hmm.
and and actively trying to share and normalize it and create safe spaces have more room to do so because it's much harder for them too. So of course, we're going to keep sharing our stories because people will resonate with them. And yeah, it's always my goal. Like I want to get onto panels and be in spaces where I can learn. And I'm not going to learn from some like, I mean, I do learn a little bit from you because you're a mom and, you're just also, I have to say, I've learned a lot from you just showing up authentically online and being like, this is my life. And now you're in the middle of it. So, which I want to get into. And then, you know what, we'll circle back to the book, but I think like this is also, let's just start here because it gives people a really clear picture of who you are, especially if they're just listening and like not watching this, they can't see you. You've got like, cool, like semi faux hawk shaved, hair on both sides and, cute little nose ring. But you have always, at least from my perspective, and been following maybe a year, shown up like, very much live stories. Like it doesn't look like you got ready or prepared. And that's not like a dig. I don't prepare for anything. Have you always just been able to be that way? Like I know you have the comedy background and so you're no stranger to like performing and just showing up and being who you are and like telling jokes or whatever. But did you have to unlearn a certain like, oh, I've got to prepare or be presentational about this or present this kind of content? And then you were like, no, I could just be myself after practicing, or you just like
Oh,
jumped
God.
in and you were like, all right, here I am. Like I just left the gym or I'm in the gym right now and I'm just going to talk about what's on my mind.
I have the most paradoxical answer to that. So, by trade, I am a professional improviser. So, I would
Mm.
say improv is my longest art form. I've been doing it, since I've been obsessed with it since I was like 12 and then got into it in college and then created a troupe in 2009 and then that troupe went on to do really big things. And so I've been doing it professionally for over a decade. And so I just am really good at creating on the spot. And so much of the art of improv is being a version of yourself. At
Mm.
the same time, I'm one of those millennials who learned during the pandemic that I'm autistic as fuck. And so most of what you're seeing is authentic, but it's also me masking. But then it's also not, because I found so much art through being vulnerable. And so that's why I come across as so authentic, is because I'm just live streaming my brain. And I'm good at live streaming my brain because of the, well, and not just improv background, but I was also live radio for
Mm.
years. That's a lot of my professional background. I was on live radio and I did a lot of celebrity interviews. And so just learning how to be interesting by by being myself, because I am interesting. And so as an autistic person, I'm very self-absorbed, and I think I'm very unique and weird. And so I learned as an artist that if I just capture myself, that is unique and interesting enough that people seem to really enjoy it. And
Mm.
then I've learned that the way that my brain works um tends to be very digestible for people. So I will hear so much of my content, oh my God, you just described what I have been trying to put into words for years. And I'm like, oh, cool. No, that was literally just how my brain thought about that. And
Yeah.
so I've just kind of learned, as an artist, it's much easier for me to be an artist if I just be myself.
Mm.
Granted, some of that self is masking. So me being funny is totally a trauma response to having to be funny in order to survive and be liked as a weird autistic kid. And but at the same time, some of us are born entertainers, and so I do think, trauma response or not, I was always kind of had this proclivity for performance and storytelling, and I feel there's a lot of manipulation in there too. Like I was a very manipulative child and have since done a lot of healing and growing around that as an adult. And now I try to use those manipulative tactics to tell stories. So if I'm
Mm.
like the goal, it's kind of like a teacher. If I'm a teacher and I'm like, this is the goal of this lesson, I need to get this child to understand math or algebra or whatever, I'm going to present it to them in this way to try to get them to learn that. I'm doing that, but with storytelling. And so maybe manipulative isn't, it is technically that, but I know that has kind of a bad connotation. But I'm basically doing a million things at once in my brain.
Yeah. Very talented.
I feel
But you're
I
like, "No, this is just how my brain works."
it's just it's just weird. I feel kind of just lucky. I guess I feel like when it comes to my page, I just feel like a reality show producer. And so
Mm.
a lot of what you're seeing is authentic, but a lot of it is me going, that thing that just happened in our living room is a great piece of content because it will show XYZ, which will teach ABC. So
Mhm.
hold on, let me get my phone out and let's create a reel around that thing that just happened. So it's very much like a reality show producer coming in and being like, let's capture that.
Yeah. Now, has your husband always been on board with this? I mean, he's obviously married to you, and so he knows that you're a performer. I
Mhm.
feel like there are a lot of similarities in probably our lives, and I don't know if your husband's responded the same as mine, but he's like, "Get that camera away from me."
No, my
Like.
husband loves it. He loves it. He definitely like he's not so much of a jester as I am. And so he will sometimes, depending on his mood, will be like, do we have to capture everything? But he doesn't even mean it in those moments because he loves it and he's seen what I can do. And so ultimately he respects the art that I make and he respects it as art. And he also adores me. He adores
Mm.
that I am so silly and so let's share, like let's just share our love and our life with the world. He's definitely less so than me, but he's also an entertainer. He's in all of my shows.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta really go down the rabbit hole on you too. Um, I wanted to bring him up too because it's so interesting. I get a lot of questions from men. Obviously, I'm a woman, so I can speak about these things. And there are people all the time who are like, Pasha should come on the show more. Like, we want Pasha's perspective. And I think people forget, like, this is my show and my choice. And just because I'm choosing to share the intimate details of our love life and our extended, outside and inside partnerships, that doesn't mean that he wants to be really public about them. A byproduct of me doing it is a lot of his life ends up being information that people can digest, but he doesn't necessarily want to come on my show all the time. Even though he's a coach and is great at what he does. And I'm always like, let's do a workshop together or a retreat. He just has a big resistance to working with me in general. We are not matched for that. However, your husband has taken up the torch in the way of having like a men's group,
Mm-hmm.
men with feelings, dudes with
Dudes with
feelings,
feelings.
dudes with feelings, yeah. Which I really appreciate, and I know you're not him, but can you share a little bit about like the what and the why, and where is that going?
Yeah, so my husband is an English professor at the college here in town, and he's been a teacher for the last 15 years. And so a lot of it is just like it's just a different classroom. It's still teaching. He also loves entertaining as well. And I think it was Avita Sawyers one time told
Mm,
me that one of the things she loves about my page is that she gets to see so much of Joe. And I recognize because she was like, just so many people just don't want their lives shown. And like, I think it's super common, the situation with your husband. I think that's more common. And so we definitely feel lucky that we're both on that same page. It's kind of a privilege. And so we try to use that privilege as much as we can because we recognize that it's lucky that we both have that type of personality and the freedom, like we talked about, like, um, it's a privilege for me to be able to share our lives without very much risk of
yeah.
our housing situation has previously been a little because of what we do, but for the most part our careers are good. So Joe is a teacher and an entertainer, and he sees this as just another version of that. He really enjoys being able to bring the cis het male experience of polyamory, white male experience, to the airwaves and to the masses. Although I feel like this is kind of a tale as old as time. Today, he identified with a journalist in an interview that his pronouns are he, they, which was news to me. I kind of saw it coming. And I thought that was really cool. So now when I say cis het, I'm like, well, cis-ish. And then also he identified as pansexual. So I was like, what? Plot twist of the fucking century.
You're like, I've been waiting for this.
I literally did that. I said that and I did this dance. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Yeah. All of the gay men in our lives are very excited. Um, yeah, so yeah, but I still think that there will always have to be a humility of the fact that he still represents a lot of cishet experience because that's how he's lived his life and the privileges that have allowed him a lot of things. And so I just think the cishet white male experience of polyamory, specifically in a previously monogamous relationship, monogamish, with the queer woman who was instantly ready for polyamory and the one who instigated it and the one who wanted it more. And he was the one who was afraid, wasn't sure if he wanted it, didn't want to do it. That whole thing, I think, is a very common experience. And so we really want to be that representation for that experience. And in the peer support space, what I'm seeing is a lot of men where most of the turbulence they're experiencing in polyamory is that they have no emotional intelligence. It's not their fault. They are victims of all patriarchy, compulsory monogamy, compulsory heterosexuality, all that
Yes.
stuff. And so not only can they not recognize a feeling, they then don't know how to feel it, process it, or ask for help outside of themselves. There's very much I'm either not going to ask for help or I can't ask for help until I have figured it out for myself. And
Mhm.
then I can go get help, which is so silly. And so I just kept coming to him. And I mean, it started even a year and a half ago when I started a series called Polyamorous Men. It was just like a series of reels and TikToks, just trying to capture the experience of men who were in touch with their emotions. And then eventually it led to launching this group, Dudes with Feelings, which is just really taken off. And it's been super crucial to the well being of men who just need to be able to be in another room with men and say, I am feeling fear. I'm feeling this emotion. I'm struggling with jealousy in this area. And kind of just like the lowest level is like just having other men be like, I hear you. You said
Mm,
it out loud and I hear you and I have felt that before and I'm still alive.
yeah.
And then, you know, the other end of that is like, oh, here is how you can process that. And here are some resources, a book, a podcast, an influencer that you can follow to help actually integrate that feeling. And so I feel like men definitely have it a bit harder on this journey because polyamory will force the emotional intelligence piece.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Everything you just said was like really juicy. And it's like taking me a moment because I'm having that moment where everything you're saying are things that I've thought, but I haven't been able to communicate so articulately, which is what you said earlier. People write into you about all the time. You really do have a way with language and breaking down these concepts, which they're not like they're not these like intricate like concepts, but they are layered in a way. And they're also things that we don't do as a society or talk about. And so I just like for a moment want to back up and just highlight the fact that, which we don't often do, is like patriarchy is also a disservice to men. I think that a lot of times men listening, because I get this sometimes, are like, oh, yeah, you talk a lot about this and that. And it can be, a little bit like isolating. We understand that it's like your experience and it's like, actually, it's bad for everybody. And here's why these systems
Mm-hmm.
have really prevented men from living their full human experience. They're missing out on a ton. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And so, like, the windup is when you enter into a polyamorous or non-monogamous container, it's just an accelerated growth program for your relationship, period. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm finding the same thing that most of the men that I'll work with, or even just friends who are trying on this space, the growth for them is exponential. Usually, this is like, obviously generalization, but for cis, gendered, heterosexual, especially white, it's going to be a massive learning curve
Mhm.
in emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And then what you shared too is like the bottom line is most people need validation, period.
Mhm.
And like that can be the most healing thing, like, period. you
Mhm.
know that in itself is what a lot of people need to even just like let a little bit of crack in to like have things flow, because it's never really been okay for men in like the greater society to even share feelings. And we think we're getting better at it, but the needle is not moving fast enough, I think, for what we really need as a society. So the fact that we could be here having this conversation is incredible. And that you and your husband are creating spaces for men specifically. I do a lot of healing work, and there's been a couple times this year where I've been able to work with all men, just men in like psychedelic therapy. And that's been wild. I thought working with all women, which is what I did for years, was really like doing the most. And I was like, oh, well,
Mhm.
I feel like I could do way more over here, and it's a lot more effective for um, society. I don't know. I definitely feel like that's where I could be more effective, is actually working in men's groups, not in this, not in polyamory, but I mean, because that's not something that I feel like I could. I'm going down a rabbit hole. But in the work that I do as like, an energy worker and sound practitioner, it's like more of a blanket space, whereas coaching is more involved. So I feel like I couldn't coach men specifically because I don't have their lived experience.
Mhm.
Anyway, wow, how did we get here? Okay, let me circle back. I'm like, I want to talk about, okay, so we touched on Joe, even though he's not here. Thank you for being such a great partner and the work that you're up to. I want to talk about the book.
Yay.
Yeah. So wait, let's see it. Polyamory and Parenthood: Navigating Non-Monogamy as Parents of Young Children. One of the things I also wanted to share with people who are listening is just your um, remodeled love and also redefining family, right? That's like one of the other things that you share a lot. And I just think that for me, I'm new to this, and I'm just like, I'm going to share my relationship, my marriage, whatever, my experiences, because people can resonate with it. I don't really have a goal at this point. I mean, it kind of is to normalize non-monogamy and to give people a space where they can be, feel seen, feel heard, whatever, and be like, oh, wow, me too. There's somebody doing it and they seem semi-normal. At least people think that about me. But it's clear to me that like your goal is to redefine a family. And that's a lot of like the just amazing, funny reels that you share, just like this minute clip. It's always like, how can we know that a family can look a million different ways, and this is mine and this is normal and this is safe and loving and my kids are healthy, which I appreciate so, so much as someone who's about to start a family. So the whole redefining family thing just like lights me up every time I see that that's the hashtag, and that's sort of the big purpose and the bigger mission behind your work. So I just wanted to highlight that for a moment too, because it's rare. There's a lot of people like me out there who are like, I'm just going to share my life. I don't really know what the end goal is right now. I'm sure it'll present itself to me as I go along. But for you, you have one. And this book is clearly a step in the direction of, okay, how can we like, lay ground in this area? And I would love to know what the bigger vision is for that, once we get through what the book is about and how long it took you to write it. I'm
Yeah.
so curious.
Yeah. So the book took from conception to publish 8 months. So kind of like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's called navigating, well, the tagline is navigating non-monogamy as parents of young children, which is very specific. So we were hoping to use the tagline to let people know the niche for sure. And it just starts, of course, with reminding folks of like our lens and asking you to stay critical of our wisdom and to read our book, recognizing the lens that we have. And so we start with that, and then we just get into who might benefit from this book. And then we just have a lot of really fun chapters. We talk about Pearl theory, which is something we created. We have a traffic lights, which is a workshop that our traffic lights chapter was actually a workshop that then is what started this whole book. We talk about couples privilege and hierarchy and how it's the nature of parenting, at least within our current kind of capitalistic nuclear, we are a polyamorous couple raising kids. It's impossible to dismantle hierarchy even when you want to. And so we talk about that. And there's a chapter on my journey of needing fewer boundaries over time. Well, our journey of needing fewer boundaries over time and how our polyamory started with lots of boundaries and how eventually they got less and less and less. And now we're just we don't very much have any boundaries. Um, well, we do, but they sort of go without saying because it's like our kids come first type of stuff.
Right. It's more like something that's just a foundation of your relationship, and then
Yeah,
you make
we
decisions
don't
based
have
on.
veto power. There's not going to be a situation in which I'm going to tell Joe that he can't date somebody. He can have people over to the house. We can like we just very much live our lives with. Actually, we have a chapter called the whole ass person principle, which is also something we coined, which is just that we see each other as a whole ass person living a whole ass life. Like you are a human in a body and you have hopes, dreams, fantasies, desires. And like, bitch, I want you to have as many of those as possible before you die. And
Yeah.
I want me to have as many of those possible before you die. And I don't want you to not have one of those simply because I don't want you to. That's so silly to me. I do not get that.
Mhm.
Um
Wait, can we I'm curious because we actually didn't go here and I meant to. Was it like that in the beginning
the
of
whole ass
opening up the
person concept.
relationship? Yeah. Or were you restrictive and had a lot of boundaries in the beginning of opening up?
Joe definitely wanted a lot more boundaries than I wanted, and I would say I acquiesced to them just to get moving in this direction. He definitely gets a little annoyed when I highlight that, but that's the truth. That is the truth, is that I was like, let's just go do our thing. Um, there was definitely some time during this last pregnancy where I needed some boundaries because we were in a pandemic and he was in really hardcore NRE, which is like everyone's nightmare when you're pregnant. Everyone's like, that's going to happen. And I was like, bring it on. And then it did. And then um, we definitely had to negotiate, but it was more like negotiating just how to be a good, balanced person. Not, I need you to not do something you want to do simply because I'm struggling, but more like, maybe we shouldn't be on our phones at the
Yeah.
dinner table, you know,
Yeah.
like that, like just in general.
For people listening who I think everybody who listens to my pod knows what NRE is, but if you're a new listener and you don't know what that is, it's new relationship energy, which is just that like floating in clouds feeling when you meet someone new that you're slightly obsessed with, and then your partner is like, great.
Yeah.
Which can a lot of times, I'm sure in your case, especially now, you have a lot of like love for that and compersion, and it's fine. But I'm imagining 7 months pregnant Jess is like, really? I'm over here growing a human.
Well, and
Like,
it was just such a we also have a principle called the tide always turns principle, which is like whatever position you're experiencing now that's like fucking your grill in polyamory, the tide will turn. And so the
mhm,
tide had been for so long me being an NRE and him struggling and being jealous and being moody about it and me being like, I won't be like that when you're an NRE, and I'm just going to like hold space for you to fully be an NRE. And then the tide turned and he learned, wow, it is super easy to get really selfish in NRE. And he did things in NRE that he swore he would never do, that he was like, you're just a bad person and bad at NRE and selfish and self-absorbed, and that's why you do those things. And when I'm an NRE, I'll never do that. And that humility that comes in when you're in NRE
mhm,
and you did all the things that you said you would never do, and then you have compassion from the other side. And then here I was experiencing a lot of jealousy and a lot of envy and acting in ways that I was like, I swore I would never act when I was in NRE. And so that's such a humbling process, and humility is just always medicine. That's one of our mantras over here. So we really like that. And so through that
yeah,
process, it was just, yeah, it was okay. It turned out okay. But we had enough skills that it was totally fine for us to
yeah.
go through that.
And two, like as I'm listening, and for people listening, here you're hearing like some of the stages of where it's not perfect and pretty, and you know, Jess and Joe were like in the practice of it and grappling through it, and it doesn't have to, like, there is no perfect way to practice. There's no perfect way to start. So you can have all the agreements and boundaries when you're starting out, and eventually, if you're doing it well and growing, they'll lift and become less and less. Yeah. You just actually shared something about the tide always turning principle, which I loved. I'm going to link it here because I think it's an Instagram um little
Carousel
whatever
post.
carousel thing, which I think is cool, and you guys will really like. So I'll link that in the show notes. But as you were saying, so you have these fun chapters.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um
we talk about something called the polysaturation problem, which is just that a lot of polyamorous people without kids are like, the great thing about polyamory is that you don't need any one partner to fulfill all your needs because you can spread your needs across many people, and that's part of the point. And we talk about at least as parents of young children in a nuclear household, that's not the case. Like, we each really only have time for one other like active, frequent partner. And so I don't get 3 or 4 partners to spread my needs across. And so when it comes to, so for me, I'm a very sexual person, but my marriage is non-sexual now. And so like when it comes to looking for another partner, I need that partner to be a sexual match for me. And so I've
mhm.
had to forego a lot of partners that I would have otherwise dated in a world in which I didn't have kids. And so like I just think that's something that that content creators without children do not fucking talk about, and they don't get it. And
Yeah.
so we that chapter was super important for us to put in there of like, you'll come across all this media that tells you that you don't have to choose, but guess what? When you have kids, you do.
Yeah. Now, do you both have another full-time partner at the moment?
No. So
No.
I have a boyfriend. I see him because he lives 6 blocks away and he doesn't have kids and he doesn't have another partner. And so that has been, I think, the
That's
thread that has held us together for as long as we have. Because in a world in which he's 25 minutes away, I'm definitely not seeing him 3 days a week. So right
Mm-mm.
now we have one date night a week that happens around dinner time, like around 6. So I miss bedtime and my husband does it on his own, and that's like a night off for me. And then I come home around 11:30. I used to stay over, but I hate his bed, and so he has to get a new bed if he wants me to stay over. But being 6 blocks away, I can just come home. And then like maybe 2 or 3 other nights a week, I'll get through bedtime, and after my kids are asleep around 8:30, I'll go over there for like 2 hours and then come home. And so that's why I get to see him as much. And like he'll pop in to my house, but he's not around very much. Like because he is 5 Capricorn placements. He is just a free little Capricorn. He is like today he is off the grid fishing. So yeah, so he does his own thing a lot. And then my husband has a long distance partner in LA that he sees seasonally. So like every 3 months, 4 months, and is looking for, so my partner's name is like Ja, and Joe always says like he's looking for his Ja locally.
Yeah.
But it's just
Cool.
hard to
So
find.
yeah, because that was kind of my next, like the thought there was, do you have time as a parent of two
No,
young children
no,
to date to meet someone
no.
new? No, right? Okay.
No, and like thank God that my husband and I are just who we are, because we really hold down the fort for the other one to go on dates and meet people. And luckily we both have flexible jobs. So like he's on campus Tuesday, Thursday, and he's still working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but he had a coffee date Friday morning,
Mhm.
last week. And like that's definitely a privilege of our lifestyle. And we
Yeah.
definitely have more time. I like if we were both 9 to 5 full-time working parents with a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, no way.
There's
My heart is with y'all because I don't know how you do it. Or if you're a single parent and you don't have somebody helping you and you like a single parent with full-time custody, I just my heart is with you. I mean, your
yeah.
autonomy is completely gone, but Joe and I will really like hold down the fort for the other person to go have time. It's just that holding down the fort alone with kids at this age is very draining.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. We
Mhm.
have this plan to do a 2 embryo transfer, which we're like, my husband's like super excited about the idea of having twins. And I'm like, I think it's going to be really hard, but
Mhm.
like then easier when they're a little bit older because
But
then they'll have each other.
but then in theory, because people are always like, oh, that's just going to make it all harder, and I'm like, but it's kind of an investment, because if
Mhm.
I invest right now in looking for, I would love to have I would love to have 2 more serious partners. To be honest, I'd love to have like a husband and a wife, another husband and a wife.
Yeah.
And like
That's
in a world in which that investment is made, and then the next thing I know, I have another partner who is around a lot. Now parenting is suddenly easier,
right.
so it's like harder during the investment phase. But if I end up finding somebody else who wants to be a part of our family and wants to be a part of our lives, well, suddenly family and child rearing is now easier. It's
Mhm.
harder during the searching process.
Yeah. It's you're the cool I love having this conversation with you because in my mind, I'm like, "Okay, we're on the right track of these things," because we've so Posh and I haven't really invested a lot in building community in polyamory or just in, like, open spaces. We have an incredible community here in LA, and somewhat abroad too, where, like, we're just we're kind of collectors of people, and we have great people in our lives, like the kind of people who want to go live on a compound together to like have children, but none of them are open, um, and so we kind of missed the boat a little bit on building solid relationships with other people who are open, just because of our different styles of how we've wanted to be polyamorous or date. And so now looking at like wanting to have kids, we've been very upfront about, okay, I think if we actually want to know other polyamorous parents or even have solid partners, like committed, consistent, full time partners, whatever. Like I have a full time partner, Lauren, who I feel like is like my wife sometimes, and she lives very close, and we spend a lot of time together. And that's been a 3-year partnership that I don't see dissolving. And she's excited that we're going to have kids. You know, she'll be like the best aunt, and we'll be here. And I think actually we'll spend a ton of time with them. But I'm like, we need more. Like, we need, like, especially if we want, you know, consistent partners that we can be romantic or sexual or intimate with in those ways, because we're not going to be finding them when we got 6 months old. Like,
It's not
no.
impossible. It's not impossible. I mean, granted, I was the birthing person in this scenario, so I don't know how it'd be different, but I was dating at 8 months postpartum,
Wow.
after both of my kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely possible, especially if you have a kid that sleeps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. But I'm very interested in making this investment now, and like, and growing community. And of course, as soon as we said that, we started meeting other people in LA who were like, oh, we could actually be friends with these people, you know, and like, they feel just like such a good fit in our lives, probably because we thought about it before. You know, you're just meeting a lot of people where I'm like, I want to have sex with you, but I don't really want to like hang out with you. And, or at least that's been a little bit more of my style
As a
recently.
demisexual, I don't get that, but sure.
Yeah. In the last couple of years anyway, that's how I've been, more or less. So I do want to shift that and have like actual relationships with, you know, multiple people before I have kids. And yeah, because there are like, I mean, there are amazing people in this community once you kind of open your eyes to it. I think having this podcast really helped shift my energy towards it, whereas before it was like more almost like an outlet for me. And now I'm like, oh, this is like, I'm realizing the last couple of years who I am as a person, and like how I want to live my life and raise my family is very much wrapped up in polyamory. But I'm younger in the, I guess what's different for me is I wasn't public or out or open until just a couple of years ago. I had so much shame around it that we were open for like 5 full years of our marriage before I told anybody, because I was like, this like thing I want to just keep in a box and like hide the key.
Mhm.
I had to do a lot of work around like coming out about it, and now I'm super public. So
Yay.
yeah, which is good. So I feel like my learning curve there has been really steep, actually, of like, I'm normal.
Mhm.
They're normal. We're all normal. Like,
Mhm.
I honestly felt like this crazy, like, sexual deviant, and like, I
Mhm.
couldn't tell anybody because I would, you know, be like an outcast. So newsflash, I'm not. Or maybe I am. I don't know. Now I like playing with the idea that I might be. Is there anything else you want to share about the book?
Yeah, so the cool thing about our book is that so currently it's an ebook, so you can read it on your screen, or we have set it so that you can print it out, which is what I did here because I know reading on screens doesn't work for everyone, so you can print it out, and it's also offered at mutual aid pricing. So you can buy it for as little as $5 and you can pay up to $50, and we just ask that those who have more pay more so that those who can't can still access the materials. And the book has been out for 8, 9, 10, 3 months. And it's averaging about $20, which is $25, which is what we would have hoped to have charged for it. So it does seem like that process is going well, which we really appreciate. So go buy the book if you have more, pay more. Definitely listen to the podcast, Remodeled Love, available for free on all of our listening platforms. And our Patreon is actually patreon.com/homeslice productions. And with that, you get access to the behind the scenes of our lives. So I give you access to my diary. I mean, my page is already my diary, but if you want my diary, join the Patreon. You get access to the close friends list on Instagram. You get access to Joe's written diary, which is on Patreon. And you get access to all of our support groups. So we have a support group for polyamorous parents called Polyamorous Parents Commiseration Club. This is a 90-minute meeting once a week where we just get on and commiserate about what we're going through. And then there's an advice sharing portion for those who would like to do more than just commiserate and they would actually like feedback. And then Dudes with Feelings is currently once a month, but we're actually adding a second one now because it's getting so popular. So that will be available twice a month, actually. And yeah, we've got all kinds of resources in our book, including other accounts that we think that you should follow, information about our Discord, and I think the most important thing is the 14 question workbook. And
Mm,
these questions are very detailed about helping you to answer questions that you might not think of and then draw very specific boundaries. So, one of them is like, do you want to tell your children about your polyamorous life? If not, what do you want to say when one of you's on a date? Can your partners tell their children about their polyamorous life? Is there a certain age you want to be at? Are they permitted to tell their friends? Just like really detailed questions so that not only can you and your partner be on the same page, but then you can literally give a copy of your answers to anyone you date so that they can read it and go, I have read every single one of these nuances and I still want to date you. Because a lot of what happens is people get frustrated with the kind of hierarchy that comes with being a parent. So you have to cancel a date because your kid's sick. And it's like, it's like, we said in our workbook that we cancel dates when our kids are sick and you chose to date me. So
yeah.
those things.
Wow. That's really incredible. I'm so glad you kind of went through and gave that look at the book, because I think that's, yeah, as you said, the most valuable part. Like that alone is worth, like, I'm excited to read it even though I don't have kids, but I think that asking those questions even before you have children and you want to get into, like raising your kids in a polyamorous household, it's so important to be aligned
Yeah.
in
Well,
what you
totally. Because
want.
what if you're on a date and you see a parent from your kids' classroom? You
Mm,
have to know what you're going to do. And
yeah.
so we ask you all those questions so that you can have a plan.
That's incredible. Thank you so, so much
Thank you.
for sharing your insights and your life with everybody, but also turning it into something really actionable and all of these tools that people can really use and that are going to work. There's no fluff here. I really, really appreciate it. Learning a lot from the other Jessicas in the world. And yeah, just appreciate your time and your energy and your vibrancy. You're a very
Thank you.
vibrant
Thank you.
woman.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, go buy the book. Love the fact that you also do like a sliding scale. It's so important in our culture because everyone has such a different relationship with money in capitalism. So please, please, please go buy this book and pay what you can and what's true for you. And also, it sounds like there are amazing offerings both in the Patreon and you have a Discord,
Mhm.
which is cool. So people go check these out because Jess is probably one of the best people I think that I can point people to at this point
Thank you.
in this journey of polyamory and non-monogamy. So you have all the resources. There's no excuses to do the work. This has been awesome. Thanks,
Thank you.
Jess.
Thank you.